Hey guys, Fred Lonsdale here, and welcome to another one of my political videos. We're doing predictions for the 2020 presidential election, and this week we are going to look at swing states, or states that have been labeled, could go either for Trump or Biden. We're going to look at swing states that are going to be leaning towards Biden and will, in my opinion, inevitably vote for him. Last week we looked at swing states that are leaning more towards Trump and that I think will inevitably vote for him. So this week it is Joe Biden's turn. A little background about myself. Again, my name is Fred Lonsdale. I have worked on political campaigns in the past, most notably Bernie Sanders, 2016. But I've also done some congressional campaigns and also some issues-based campaigns. So I have a pretty good understanding of electoral politics, and I've even worked in some of these battleground states that we're sort of discussing here. As I'm sure you can probably guess, my personal political leanings are kind of to the left. I consider myself a progressive. I was a Bernie supporter, obviously in 2016, but also this time around as well. But I really do make an effort to make these videos as objective as possible. If you want sort of opinion-based sort of information, if you want videos, articles, things like that will lean towards a certain political perspective, it's really not too difficult to find that on the internet, on social media, TV. It's really not that difficult. So my whole point of doing these is kind of to try and inform people and make it like somewhat educational. So, I really, really do try to make these as objective as possible and give you what I think is a very fair analysis based on sort of facts. I don't really use polls because polls can be wrong. But, I look at like history, I look at the demographics of an area, I look at recent election results. So, yeah. I think I try and do a pretty good job of making this as unbiased as possible. So, without further ado, we are going to look at states that are leaning towards Joe Biden and, in my opinion, will inevitably vote for him. First up on our list is Nevada. Nevada is considered a swing state because for a while it was sort of a presidential bellwether. I think that, if I'm correct in my information, it had voted up until 2016. Nevada had voted for the winner of the presidential election every single year since 1960. So that's John F. Kennedy. So obviously it voted for Reagan twice, voted for Clinton twice, and Bush twice, and Obama twice. So, yeah, Nevada historically has been a swing state. I think that this year, I'm definitely putting into the lean column for Joe Biden. I think that he's going to win there. This year, it definitely is. Nevada as a state is definitely favorable to Democrats because geography is a huge thing. As a state, it's pretty much a massive desert with a few cities that were built for all intents and purposes, gambling. So, obviously the biggest city in Nevada is Las Vegas, which sits in Clark County. And Clark County is basically the population center of Nevada. So much so that you can win Clark County alone and win the state. That's how much of the population lives in Las Vegas, Clark County, So Las Vegas and its suburbs. It's a Democratic stronghold. As long as people turn out for Biden, and I think they will, he should not have an issue winning that state. Trump will absolutely win the rural counties, but the thing about the rural counties in Nevada is literally very few people live there. Like, it is a literal desert. So I think it's going to be really hard for Trump to overcome sort of the turnout in Clark County, Las Vegas and its suburbs. The demographics also, they stack up really well for Biden. You have a lot of minorities, African Americans, a huge Latino population that is growing. The state, sort of its workforce, especially in Clark County, skews younger because most of the jobs are sort of centered around casinos, restaurants, hotels, things like that. So the workforce definitely skews younger, and even perhaps more importantly, it's unionized. A lot of the jobs there are unionized. So organized labor has a huge sway in Nevada elections. I think last point I want to make about Nevada, going back to 2018, Democrats had a really strong showing. They flipped a Senate seat in that state. They flipped the governor's seat there. So they went from having a Republican senator and a Republican governor to having Democratic senator and Democratic governor. They also, and on another note, to go along with already their second Democratic senator. So basically, they pulled what's called the trifecta, where you have two Democratic senators or two senators from the same party and a governor from the same party. So two Democratic senators, Democratic governor. They also held on to 3 out of the 4 congressional seats in that state. So yeah, I mean, Democrats basically, they had a really good showing in Nevada in 2018. I think that as long as they get, Biden gets the turnout that he needs, and I think he will in Clark County, there really should not be an issue for Biden winning there. Also, that Senate seat that flipped, I believe it was Jackie Rosen who unseated Dean Heller, and Dean Heller was looked at as one of the more vulnerable Republicans, but still, to unseat a sitting incumbent who's running again, it's not the easiest thing. So I think the Nevada looks pretty good for Joe Biden, and I would be very surprised if he didn't win that seat. Next state we're going to go to, it's another small state, but this state is in the northeast of the country, and it is New Hampshire. New Hampshire has long been talked about as a swing state. It kind of has that reputation, at least amongst sort of New England, for its deciding role in 2000. It went for George W. Bush. It was basically the only New England state that went for George W. Bush, and effectively, people around here say it swung the election, so we ended up with George Bush instead of Al Gore. New Hampshire it's definitely a swing state. They have Republican. They've elected Republicans as well as Democrats. They have Democratic. They've had Democratic governors. And Republican senators and vice versa. So it's pretty. I think that. And also the people there, sort of in New Hampshire, they it's one of those states, like their motto is live free or die. It's pretty much like, even if you look at, like, Republicans, registered Republicans versus registered Democrats, it's pretty much even across the state. And their biggest voting bloc is independents. So it's like pretty much like your pure toss-up state. It has gone for Democrats in recent presidential elections, and I honestly think that this year will be no different. I think that one of the reasons it's being talked about as a potential swing state is because the margin in 2016 was so close. Clinton won New Hampshire, but she only did so by like 0.03, 0.04 percentage points. I think out of almost 700,000 ballots cast, Clinton won the state by, I think, 3,000. So that's really, it just got really dark in my room. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. Trump definitely has a certain sort of appeal in New Hampshire, but I really think that Biden's going to be able to win that state. The thing about New Hampshire is that, yes, there are a good amount of hardcore Republicans, but you also have a solid base of like McCain-style Republicans who there's a good chance that they might cross over, that they very well might cross over and vote for Joe Biden, because they look at Joe Biden as sort of a moderate, in the same sort of moderate Democrat, in the same sort of sense that John McCain ended up being looked at as sort of a moderate Republican. I think that the New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Democratic Party has also done a lot of sort of key organizational work there. They're able to turn out voters in sort of presidential election years quite well. The one thing to be wary about with Biden is that in New Hampshire he lost the New Hampshire Democratic primary. He came in fifth place in basically a field of 5 candidates, so he finished dead last. That's like really the only thing that I could see him losing the state. But I think that it's a different situation. I think that a lot, because it was a 5-person field, and I think a lot of people who would have voted for Joe Biden in that primary voted for Pete Buttigieg or voted for Amy Klobuchar. I think if, given the choice between Trump and Biden, all those people are going to obviously vote for Joe Biden. I think that even people who voted for Bernie and obviously for Warren are gonna say, well, I'm obviously voting for Biden. The choice is pretty clear. So I think Joe Biden is going to be able to sort of consolidate Democratic support in New Hampshire. As I said before, I think independents are the largest voting bloc in New Hampshire. I think they're going to break really hard for Joe Biden. That is that's going to be a huge factor. I think that he's going to win independents. He's going to win substantially more independents than Trump will. And also the thing about New Hampshire, it's a small state. There's a lot of rural areas, but the rural areas they're not like crimson red rural areas like in somewhere like Kansas or Nebraska or Alabama. Like the rural areas in New Hampshire, like, yeah, some of them might skew Republican, but not by overwhelming numbers. Trump is not going to get the blowout numbers from the rural areas in New Hampshire that he might get from somewhere like Wyoming or Arkansas or Nebraska. It's just not going to happen. So I think that the Biden he's going to do well enough in New Hampshire, and I think he's going to win. It's not going to be a blowout, but I think he's going to win. I think he's definitely going to win by more than sort of the 0.03, 0.04% that Clinton won by. It's not going to be that close. I think there will be a winner in New Hampshire announced fairly quickly after the polls close, and I think that person is going to be Joe Biden. Next, we are going out to the Midwest. The third state on my list that is sort of a swing state, could be a swing state that is going to lean to Joe Biden, Minnesota. Minnesota has been sort of talked about as a potential pickup for Trump because of the demographics, the fact that Trump was able to pick off a bunch of Midwestern states in 2016 that have similar demographics to Minnesota. I think that is I think that's premature. I think that Minnesota is to the Republicans what Texas or Georgia should be to the Democrats. A nice idea, a bonus if we can get them, but that's really all that they should be looked at. You should not be really investing a lot of resources in there because the numbers they're just not there in terms of being able to win. The thing about Minnesota is, you can win the Twin Cities and some of the secondary cities that can really carry the state. There's pockets of rural areas in that state that are staunchly Democrat as well. Based on sort of, yes, like you do hear a lot of talk about the Iron Range sort of drifting towards Trump, but that's kind of a sparsely populated area of the state. It's not enough to swing, it's not enough to make up the numbers that are going to be coming out of the Twin Cities and the suburbs, in the southern part of the state. It's not enough. If he wins that, it's not going to be enough to make up for Biden probably winning in the secondary cities like Duluth and St. Cloud and Rochester. So Trump really faces an uphill climb. Also, in Minnesota, you got to look at 2018. 2018 was a good year for the Democrats in Minnesota. Yeah, like Republicans were able to pick up a couple congressional seats, but those were sort of moving towards more, they'd been sort of historically Democratic seats, but they were sort of moving more towards Republican, or sort of more towards the Republican Party anyway. I just don't think Trump, based on his record, is going to be able to do as well as sort of those new candidates were able to do in the Iron Range. Plus, you gotta look at the success that the Democrats did have. Okay, Amy Klobuchar, she retained her Senate seat. And she did so by a very comfortable margin. But that's to be expected. No huge shock there. I think perhaps maybe more of a shock was that Minnesota held a special election for Al Franken's vacated seat, and Tina Smith won by about 10-point margin, which is the Democrat, and that's a pretty comfortable margin, especially obviously Donald Trump has a lot more name recognition than the Republican candidate Karen Housley, but it's not as if Tina Smith was a household name in Minnesota. So for her to win by a 10-point margin, that's not a great look for Republican chances there. And also, you have to look at the governor's race. People thought that could possibly be a pretty close race and could get, could the Minnesota could have a Republican governor. They have, I think they have had Republican governors in the past. Tim Walz, he won by the Democrat. Tim Walz won by a very comfortable margin, and this is the thing: both Tina Smith and Tim Walz won their elections. They lost, like, if you look at a map, they lost a lot of like the rural areas, but they still won by fairly comfortable margins just by winning in the Twin Cities, winning in traditionally sort of those secondary cities, winning in traditionally sort of rural but strong rural areas with strong Democratic presence. Yeah, they lost most of the counties in the state, but the concentration of the population, most of the people in Minnesota live in the Twin Cities or in the surrounding suburbs, and that's Democratic strongholds. You pick up the secondary cities and like Duluth, St. Cloud, and it's going to be a real difficult time for Donald Trump or really any Republican candidate to win there. Just on a last note, the Minnesota Democratic Party, they're not called the Minnesota Democratic Party, they're called the Minnesota Democrats, Farmers, and Laborers Party. So they've done a great job of sort of, sort of creating that sort of big tent idea. So if you're a rural farmer, you're part of that. If you are a white working class laborer, you're part of that. You can identify with that. So they've done a really good job of sort of blending sort of what it means to be a Democrat in Minnesota. So I have that going to Biden. I have Minnesota going to Biden. Next up is another Midwestern state right next to Minnesota, Michigan. This was sort of looked at as the big upset for Donald Trump in 2016. He pulled off the mother of all upsets and was able to win Michigan. What people don't talk about is that Trump winning Michigan was kind of the perfect storm of things happening. Clinton ran an objectively stupid campaign in that state. They had people, they were like bussing volunteers into Iowa, making calls into Wisconsin, even though she was only up by the polls showed she was only up by 2 points. She didn't even visit the state. She didn't campaign in the state. It was just an objectively stupidly run campaign there. Factor number two, the people in Detroit didn't turn out. The minority communities of Detroit didn't turn out for Clinton because they weren't excited about her. And two, the suburbs went for Clinton, but not by overwhelming margins. It was pretty close in the suburbs. So she was able to win there, but not by the margins that I think her campaign thought she would win. And the fourth factor, and a lot's made of it, sort of white working class voters in Michigan sort of voting for Donald Trump. What really happened, at least my understanding of it, is it's not so much that white working class voters broke super hard for Trump. The numbers for white working class voters who vote Republican stayed more or less the same. Problem was white working class voters for Democrats didn't turn out. One labor union, he's a head of a local labor union there. He said, in 2016, I was sitting with 10 guys who these guys, they vote in every election. They vote in presidential, midterms. They are, reliable voters. I said, out of those 10, 4 were voting for Clinton, 3 were voting for Trump, and 3 weren't voting at all. When He said comparatively, in 2008 with Obama, 8 of them voted for Obama, 1 of them voted for McCain, and 1 didn't vote at all. In 2012, 7 voted for Obama, 2 voted for Romney, and 1 didn't vote at all. So that's a huge. That's a massive. That's a massive shift right there. I mean, if you take that and you apply that to sort of the broader population, sort of white working class population and middle class workers, sort of gray collar workers in Michigan outside of Detroit, well, that means that basically that Clinton got half the votes that Obama got. So yeah, I mean, that's how. I mean, if you're looking for answers for why Trump won Michigan, it was all, and you combine that with the other 3 things. Yeah, it's pretty. It kind of explains why Trump won Michigan, and I don't think that is going to happen this time around. Trump might get one of those things to happen again. He might get 2 of those things to happen again. But he's certainly not going to get all 4 of those things to happen again. And that's what he needs to have a shot at winning that state. I certainly think that there's no way that Biden could run, even if unless they were trying to throw the state. There is no way the Biden campaign could run a worse campaign in that state than what Hillary Clinton did in 2016. So I think the people in Detroit, Wayne County, are gonna turn out for Biden, especially sort of African Americans. I think the votes coming out of there are gonna be way up from where they were in 2016. Biden has that Obama halo in some ways that Clinton did not. So I think they're going to turn out. They're going to show up for him in big numbers. I also think that the suburbs are going to break for Biden, and I think they're going to break much more significantly than they did for Clinton. And lastly, Trump might win white working class voters, outside of Detroit, outside of Grand Rapids, like 2 major cities. But I don't think he's going to win them by overwhelming numbers. I think that Joe Biden, his Midwestern sort of, I'm a guy from Scranton, like his sort of Midwestern sort of Rust Belt shtick, kind of, it actually plays better, than in some respects than sort of New York Trump, So I think that Biden is going to do a lot better with your white sort of working class and lower middle class voters. He's gonna bring people out in the urban areas a lot more than Clinton was able to, and I think the suburbs are going to go for Trump or for Biden. So I think that it's going to be a real challenge for Trump to win in Michigan. I have Michigan going to Biden. Last state on the list. And I kind of went back and forth between Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I settled on Pennsylvania. I have Pennsylvania leaning towards Biden, and I think it will inevitably vote for Biden. Biden likes to claim, he never misses an opportunity to claim he is from Scranton, so Scranton, Pennsylvania. So he's got kind of a sort of a native son thing going on with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, to a lesser extent than Michigan, was kind of the perfect storm in 2016. Obviously, the Clinton campaign put a lot more resources into Pennsylvania, but so did Trump. He's going to do that again this time, obviously, but Biden will put resources into Pennsylvania. I think that Biden has a lot more potential to turn out sort of urban voters, African American, Latino, sort of minority voters in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That's going to go a long way in running up the margins in those cities. I think he also is going to perform better in secondary cities like Allentown, Reading, Lancaster, Scranton. Um, and I think that he, you know, in some respects, Pennsylvania came down to one county, uh, Luzerne County, I believe. It's got Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre, something like that. So, and anyway, it's one of the counties on sort of the New Jersey border. I think that Joe Biden he appeals more to sort of your blue collar workers in those areas. I think, your counties like Luzerne County that went for Trump are going to flip back. I think counties like Erie County, a lot of blue collar workers there that went for Trump are going to flip back to Biden. And I think that that's going to be enough to deliver Biden the state. I think it's going to be close. If Biden wins by more than, I think it's going to be around, 2 percentage points. But I do think that Biden is going to be able to win Pennsylvania. We know he's going to win the cities, like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. I think it's a pretty good guess that he's gonna do well in the suburbs, so the areas around Philadelphia, and to a lesser extent Pittsburgh. But certainly is going to be able to run up some big numbers in the suburbs and surrounding counties of Philadelphia. And as you know, I think he's going to be able to. They're not going to be blowouts, but I think he's going to be able to win. He's going to be able to win those secondary cities and probably flip some of the counties that went to Trump in 2016 and basically delivered him Pennsylvania. Another thing to watch with Pennsylvania is sort of recent, going back to 2018. They had like a kind of an important Senate election. It didn't end up being very close, but it's more interesting due to the candidates who ran. On the Democratic side, you had Bob Casey Jr. beating the Republican Lou Barletta. Lou Barletta was actually Trump's state director in 2016. Trump handpicked him to run for that Senate seat. It was, Trump called him up and said, Lou, I need you to run for this Senate seat. Lou Barletta campaigned on being a reliable Trump vote in the Senate. Bob Casey Jr., he's not exactly the most exciting politician. He kind of is, he's a little bit vanilla. He's not sort of that transformative figure, with these huge ideas and vision. He kind of reminds me actually of Joe Biden a little bit. And in that election, Bob Casey Jr. wiped the floor with Lou Barletta. He won by over 10 percentage points. I think it was like 12 or 13 percentage points. So basically doing exactly what I said, running up the score in Philadelphia and the suburbs, performing really well in Pittsburgh, winning the secondary cities, Allentown, Erie, Reading, places like that. So that's really the blueprint, and I think it's going to be really difficult for Trump to overcome that. They also had a governor's race that some people thought could pose a challenge. I always want to call him Dan Wolf because there was a state senator from around my hometown who was named Dan Wolf, but the Pennsylvania governor, his name is Tom Wolf. Not to be confused with the author, but he was. People thought maybe, hey, Trump won that state. It might be pretty hard for Tom Wolf to get reelected. It was not. It was not a close election. Tom Wolf was, he's a moderate Democrat, but he was able to win by a pretty substantial margin. So I think Trump is really facing an uphill climb. I think that a lot of the Democrats who, I think Pennsylvania suffered a lot from Democrats and left-leaning independents who just didn't vote in 2016. I think that was sort of what the real catalyst that tipped the state in favor of Trump. It was just sort of, your leaning Clintons and sort of left-leaning independents who just said, you know what, I'm not really excited about this. I think Clinton's going to win anyway, so whatever. And then Trump ended up winning. That's not going to happen again. Leaning Bidens are going to go vote. Left-leaning independents are going to go vote because they saw what happens when they don't go vote. So as long as Biden is able to turn out, sort of the people who are will vote for him, but aren't necessarily your solid, reliable voters, I think he's going to win Pennsylvania. All right. So that is my list of states leaning towards Biden and states that will inevitably vote for him. Our next video is going to be a few states that, and I hate to do this, but a few states that are just going to be pure toss-ups, because I think that they are going to be toss-ups right down to the time that the polls close on Election Day. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.